Om Sarvadharma Sthapakastvam Sarvadharma Swarupakaha Acharyanam Mahacharyo Ramakrishna Ayate Namaha. We are studying Sri Ramakrishna, the Great Master, second part, as the spiritual aspirant or struggler or sadhak. And in that, we are about to finish the first chapter, name of which is Sadhak and Sadhana. We have read in detail what is sadhana and two paths of sadhana and how a man reaches the goal by both the paths. In great detail, Sardhan Swamiji has explained it. Now what remains? We are read up to para 12. Now what remains in this para 13? Incarnations of God combine in them both the aspects, the divine and the human. Both the aspects means not Jnani and Bhakta. Huh? Both the aspects, the divine and the human. They are God and they are appearing as man. So both the aspects are combined in them. So they sometimes appear as perfect even during sadhana. So that is the difference. That they appear as man, so they are struggling. They are God. So suddenly that God appears. So they are doing sadhana, but suddenly that perfection comes. Why is describing that? That we are learning the ideal sadhana from the lives of avatars. While learning, we should understand that there is something which we will not be able to imitate, we need not imitate, and that is their own. We must understand that. Otherwise, we will be confused. So he is mentioning that this is all right, this path and this path. And they will show hundreds of paths, that means the variations of these. But while doing sadhana, suddenly the divine aspect may come out. So that portion we'll have to only understand, bow down to them, pray to them, and proceed in our sadhana. Hence, the need of studying their lives from both the points of view, because they are both. So we must study their lives completely. We must study them as God and we must study them as man. And then only the study will be complete and we will benefit from that spiritually. By studying them as God, they become our Ishta. And by studying them as man, they become our ideal sadhak, ideal man. And already explained in Guru Bhav, they are the ideal teachers. So now, these are the ways laid down by the scriptures for persons treading the paths of knowledge and of devotion to arrive at their ultimate goal. We have seen that the devotees do not know the ultimate goal, they go on evolving in their idea of the goal also, but ultimate goal is same and they reach, both of them reach there. But as the two natures, the divine and the human, are found in the incarnations of God, general, all their lives, some, oh, but as the two natures, the divine and human, are found in incarnations of God all their lives. Sometimes they are seen even during their sadhana period to the to be, to not to the, to be endowed with the knowledge and power proper to perfect persons. This happens because they naturally have the power of roaming on both the planes, okay, the divine and the human, or because their divine nature is inborn and spontaneous, That means they don't have to achieve that. It is there, their own. Sometimes it pierces the external veil of their human nature and manifests itself from time to time. Very clearly, yes, it is correct. Whatever may be our conclusion, that means he has described the same thing with little difference. Whatever may be our conclusion, these facts have made the lives of the incarnations of God impenetrably mysterious to the human intellect. If you proceed simply by the intellect, the human intellect, it is impossible to carry. Unless we know that this is their divine nature, this is their human nature. When we can split it, then only we can understand. But suddenly when the divine nature comes, we are baffled. It does not seem to be probable that this intricate mystery will ever be solved completely because it is not in human intellect. But it is very certain that endless good accrues to man when he studies these lives with reverence. So intellectual analysis is not complete. But if the basic Shraddha is there, Shraddha, that we are studying a perfect life. We are studying the perfect model of sadhana. We are studying God as man. If this faith is there, then a lot of things we can achieve through the intellect also. The very angle will change. We will not be overcritical. We will analyze, but we cannot say, we cannot blame them at some point. So that is called reverence, Shraddha. In the past Puranic age, the human nature of the incarnations of God was kept hidden. That he has already described. That the sadhana they do not like to describe and all that. Only God was shown. In the Puranic period, the exception in the known books is Valmiki Ramayana. There he does not hide the human nature. And Valmiki Ramayana is not a Puran. Tulsi Ramcharitmanas is a Puran. And Kamba Ramayana and this Ramayana and that Ramayana, they are all Purans. But during that Puranic period, say Bhagavatam and all that, the human nature is suppressed. It was kept hidden and the Divine One alone discussed. In this skeptical modern age, that means we always like to doubt, that is called skeptical modern age. The divine nature of those characters is being completely disregarded, while the human one is being studied. So we do not want this extraordinary or God, or so we are studying only human nature. But that will never complete that study. In the present instance, we shall make an effort to explain to the reader by discussion of those characters means incarnations, that both the natures coexist in them. That is a better word than the previous word of combine. We could have even changed there. Incarnations of God. In the incarnations of God, both the aspect, the divine and the human, coexist. It is needless to add here that we would not have been able to look upon the character of the incarnations of God in that way if we had not had the privilege of meeting the Master. Because past thing we know only as described. And because we are Sri Ramakrishna, they have. His disciples were very critical, analytical minded, Western educated young man. And they also had with them those who had directly seen Sri Ramakrishna during sadhana. So they had the advantage, and had this book not come, then what would have, the world would have lost a great thing. So we now move to chapter 2. This very thing elaborated the attitude of a sadhaka in the life of an incarnation of God. In general, he is taking, and through Sri Ramakrishna will explain that. The coexistence of the divine and human aspects in the master. So through master, he will show the others. Blessed by the opportunity of being in the holy company of the divine master, we have been charmed to notice the wonderful coexistence of both the aspects of divinity and humanity in him. Charmed to see there is a very sweet, beautiful coexistence. The more we have contemplated his life and character, life, events, character, inside, the more have we been convinced of this fact. If we had not seen him, we could never have had the conception that such contrary ideas could exist in such sweet congruence and harmony in the same person. It is impossible in our normal imagination, this is not possible, this or this. But because we have seen them, we can. It is because we observe it in him that the conviction has grown in us that he was God and man in one. Not 50-50%. That he was exactly what the infinite being of God and his power are when manifested behind the veil of the human body and human feelings. Human body and mind, human feelings. Again, it is because we saw it that we have become convinced that there were certainly such wonderful manifestation of both these aspects in the lives of the incarnations of past ages also. Here, it does not tally exactly with the. I would like to go sentence by sentence. Vrutha Bhan has not come at all. That was an important word. Oh, Initahai. Exactly what the infinite being of God and his power are when manifested through the veil of this. Then, Erup dekhiyachi boliyai bujiyachi je. It is because we saw it that we have come to understand. Aha, I missed a sentence here. Huh? It is because we saw it that we have come to understand that he feigned neither aspect, that mithya bhav. That means as if he is showing only either the divine or the human, both were in him. But actually assumed human nature for the good of humanity. Hmm. And showed us the path leading to divinity. So God appears as man so that man may uh, rise to divinity. That is the purpose of divinity. That means in human mind and body, how the divine consciousness plays, who else can show perfectly? The God himself is there. And he has the human body and mind. And so, this perfectly shown model is not available anywhere else. And following that, we can rise to divinity. Again, it is because we saw it that we have become convinced that there were certainly such wonderful manifestation of both these aspects in the lives of the incarnations of past ages also. Because that is a group. But in one incarnation is in others also. The same is the case with all incarnations. We shall meet with the same truth if we study with reverence the life of any one of the incarnations of God. He has again repeated the word Shraddha, because human intellect is fully not able to penetrate. And we don't have just to believe, we have to analyze. But the basic minimum Shraddha is there that yes, we are discussing God and we are discussing man. We shall meet with the same truth if we study with reverence the life of any one of the incarnations of God. We shall find that impelled by a wonderful unknown power, they are sometimes in the same plane of consciousness as other human beings are, and behave like ourselves with all the objects and persons of the world. Very sweet when we read the details in Sri Ramakrishna and also the previous incarnations. It appears so sweet as a human being because he is a perfect human being, and so his relation with everybody appears so sweet. Only love and love and love. But at other times, ascending to higher planes bring to us information about the unknown to humanity, their nature, and so they bring the information to us. Although they do not long for it, someone adjusts and arranges everything and makes them act that way. They do not want to show that they are God, but the providence is there, dispensation is there, so suddenly it comes. And it is so from their childhood because they are God. But getting as they do get sometimes an indication of that power in them in their childhood, they cannot detect and understand that it is their own. The child's mind, because they are born as human beings, so the child's mind is not developed enough to feel that it is their own. But it comes now and then that they see and lies deep within them, is their own and lies deep within them. Also, they cannot apply that power at will in order to ascend to higher spiritual plane at will. So, by function of the human will, they cannot rise to that plane. It automatically comes. And they cannot apply that power at will in order to ascend to higher spiritual planes and see all things and persons of the world in the light of the divine consciousness and behave with them accordingly. God seeing man. But as they go on, God seeing not only man, but God seeing the God in man, God seeing the potential in man. But as they go on getting more frequent experiences of that power in their lives day after day, a strong desire to be fully acquainted with it arises in their minds. Desire not of enjoyment of the world. They are seeing the power and divinity again and again. And so they want to be fully acquainted with it and make it their own. It is this desire that endows them with a unique ardor and enthusiasm and induces them to undertake spiritual discipline. That is the ideal sadhana. For us, When we get the conviction of our real nature, then the real sadhana starts. In them, the conviction is coming in the form of direct experience, and their struggle to make it their own, then that becomes the absolute model for us. Incarnations of God have no desire for selfish enjoyment. That again and again is pointing out, though they appear with a human body and mind, this one great difference is there. Their mind is universal in an individual appearing body, but the mind is universal. And because the mind is universal, the body also many times changes. So no selfishness is possible in them. No selfishness is possible in them. However, there does not exist the slightest tinge of selfishness in that desire of the incarnations of God. That means I will feel happy if I do this. That is not their desire. Because it is coming again and again, I want to possess it. Not to speak of their not having any yearning for the enjoyment of the petty pleasures of the senses here or hereafter. Even the idea that they themselves might become liberated and enjoy the infinite bliss, irrespective of others' fate, does not exist in them. See the selfishness of the highest order. That I will become mukta, let what happens to the others. That does not appear in them. Even the struggle for sadhana is that everybody will be able to show the path. Everybody able to see the path. The only thing that is observed to exist at the root of that desire is the inquiry whether that unknown extraordinary power really exists in the background of the universe. So, whatever is in them at the background of the universe, is there God really exists? Or it is a mere fabrication of their own imagination? It appears in them. So, it may be just imagination of the mind, or it is really there. So by the sadhana they will find out, and it will benefit us tremendously. All our doubts and imaginations, feeling of imaginations will vanish. That power, under whose guidance and direction they experience from their birth unique ideas, unintelligible to man, and sometimes feel that everything in the realm of ideas has an existence as real as that of the things and persons known in the gross world. So here the word bhava has come in the realm of ideas. There is no English translation for that. Ideas, thoughts, subtler experiences, subtler world. So that is as much real as the gross world. Sometimes you will find that is more real than the gross world. So that is the root of that desire, that they will find out that how much real that world of ideas is this, and the ultimate world. For by comparing their knowledge and experiences with those of others, they become convinced in a very short time that the latter do not have the same knowledge about the nature of the things and persons of the world as they themselves have all their life. So they have their unique life. But how do they know that their life is unique? Because they come in touch with people and they compare and they see that these things are not there. And so from us, the whole world will learn. And that others lack almost completely the power to see the world from a higher plane of consciousness. Almost completely, some here and there sometimes might come, but they will be able to show that completely to the humanity. That is their desire. Their compassion, they undertake sadhana for the welfare of others. This is very clear in the life of Buddha because he had no misery, but he saw that the world has misery. And so, how to help the world get rid of that misery? That was the very root of his sadhana. In Sri Ramakrishna, that it is seeing again and again. So, is that at the root of humanity? And if I can perfectly control and bring it to reality, then everybody will be able to benefit and feel that as their reality. That is not all. They become convinced simultaneously of another fact through that comparison. They can understand that because they see the world in two different forms from the two planes of consciousness, the ideal and the real, objects of senses like sight, taste, which are pleasant for the time being, cannot allure them as they do human beings in general. They see from a higher standpoint that this is unreal. Man does not see that. Oh, beautiful explanation of human imperfections or desires. We do not know the higher truth. We feel we are subjects in the objective world. So naturally the desires are there. Now they see like that, but they also see that all this subject-object division is unreal. And so they cannot feel that temptation which we feel. Cannot allure them as they do human beings in general, and the dense shadows of despondency and peacelessness that arise from the reverses of fortune cannot cloud their intellect. So, human life, sometimes the fortune is high, sometimes low, and then despondency, peacelessness, that cannot come in them. There, all that is related to sadhana only, but not in the worldly pleasure and pain. Therefore, their compassionate minds become completely absorbed in the struggle to gain complete control over that power. Thereby, they ascend to higher and higher planes of consciousness and remain there as long as they like in order to teach the people of all classes and conditions, from the highest to the lowest, to do so themselves and become endowed with peace. So that is the nature of the desire, that they can show people from the lowest to the highest, and so that people will gain that peace. That is their character. People of all classes and conditions, different minds, different circumstances, different backgrounds, everybody, Jagat Guru, they become. So, two mighty streams of sadhana and compassion are always seen to flow side by side in their life. Oh, that means they want to gain, they want to distribute. They want to rise higher and they want to distribute. These two flows are simultaneous in them. Because their universal mind, they are so much compassionate that if I get something, I must give to others. That is their life. Although that compassion may increase 100-fold on account of the vast difference between their own condition and that of the human beings in general. So compare, but that is not the origin. Their incarnationhood is for this purpose only. So it is ingrained in them, both the things. They are one with the whole humanity and they are sadhaks. So, because these two things are in them, so they are compassionate. Seeing comparison and everything increases that, but that is not the source. It may be said that the source of their unique compassion has not been identified, then this is our imagination that it is in their root of personality itself. It has to be said that it is inborn. So that is the very root of their birth. Nothing further can be added. Let us quote an illustration cited by the master. So, through example only, we have to feel it. An illustration of it, the master's story of three friends having the vision of the Guru of bliss. Three friends went for a walk in a field. They went to the middle of the field and saw an area enclosed by a high wall. Sweet sounds of music, both vocal and instrumental, were coming out of it. Attracted by the music, they wished to know what was going on within. They went round the wall and found that there was not a single entrance to it. What could they do? One of them somehow procured a ladder and climbed up the wall, while the other two stood below. The first man got up on the wall and was beside himself with joy on seeing what was happening within. He laughed loudly and jumped within. He could not at all wait to tell the other two standing below what he saw within. A human being doing sadhana. He becomes aware of some bliss and he sees that and becomes one with it. They thought, our friend is a fine man. He did not even tell us once what he saw. However that may be, we have to see what is there inside. Then one of them climbed up that ladder. The moment he got to the top, he also, like the first, burst out laughing and jumped with it. What was the third man to do then? He climbed up that ladder and saw the fact of bliss within. When he saw it, his first thought was to join it. But immediately afterwards he thought, if I now join it, the public outside cannot know that there is a place here for the enjoyment of such bliss. Shall I enjoy it alone? Thinking so, he forced his mind to turn back and came down. Then he began to proclaim to one and all, to whomsoever he happened to see, listen, there is a place of bliss here. Come, let us enjoy it together. He thus took all the people with him and joined in the enjoyment. You see now, just as we cannot find out the cause of the third friend's inclination to share the enjoyment with many, so also we cannot point out why the desire to do good to humanity is present in the incarnations from their very childhood. So ingrained in them, that is their constitution. The bliss is such that generally man gets dissolved. It is very great mind which can hold it, calm down, tell others. The incarnations of God have to practice self-control like ordinary man. Okay. So now we come to the actual sadhana. So we have to struggle to get self-control. The incarnations have also to struggle to get self-control. From what has been said, some perhaps may come to the conclusion that the incarnations of God are never to fight like ourselves with the unruly senses, that perhaps they remain under their control throughout their lives. They are human beings and that they follow them like meek children, our organs. And thus they can easily make their minds turn from worldly side states, etc., and direct them to higher ideals. We say in reply that it is not so. They are human beings Selfish desire is not there, but indriyas are there. Indriyas have their own way, human indriyas. In human mind has its own way. And so, in order to see the truth, they have to control them. In this respect also, they act in their human play like men. Here also they have to come out victorious from the fight and then proceed on their paths. Innumerable desires of the mind. So he is explaining now. Anyone who has tried to know even a little of the nature of the human mind has seen that beginning from the gross, there exists in it infinite strata of desires. Not only infinite desires, but infinite levels of desire. Gross, little more subtle desires. Subtler and still subtler. If you are he's giving examples, if you are somehow able to go beyond one, another comes and obstructs your path. And when you conquer the latter, still another takes its place. This is human sadhana. When you have, now examples, when you have left the gross ones behind, the subtle ones come and oppose you. If you give up the example, if you give up lust of woman for man, that of gold arises. That is almost the same plane, but different. Kam is not there, Kanchan is there. Why you want Kanchan? No, desire for Kanchan. If you refrain from indulging in both in a gross way, attachment to outward beauty, lust is not there. But man appreciates beauty of a woman. Woman appreciates the manliness of man. That itself can lead the mind astray. Remember, he's telling us, sometimes we feel that we are not sexually attracted, but beauty, appreciation of the beauty, poetry, appreciation of poetry, acting, appreciation of acting, all these may diversify our mind. So that is the strata. Outward beauty, desire for name and fame. Not money, but name and fame. And the like come to you. Or if you carefully renounce all worldly attachments, they come and occupy your heart in the guise of idleness or compassion. Oh. If I notice that I don't want to do anything, tamogun comes in man, stoicism and all that. So if he has no desire, he just does not move to go higher level. Some people mistake this Sita Prajna to become a wall. No, not at all. Feelings are very keen. So this is another danger. Or compassion. For example, a man leaves his family. Compassion. What will happen to my mother, my father, my brothers, my sister? So, or to public in general, so I stop my sadhana. That is human nature. The master urged us to give up desire. So the whole thing is giving up desires or strata. And that is why in the Gita and in all the scriptures, Prajahati yada kaman sarvan partha manogatan atmanevatmana tushta sita prajnas tada uchyate. The master spoke of this dangerous nature of the mind and always warned us to shun the net of desires. In order to carry conviction to us, he would sometimes cite examples from his own life, because of his subtler desire, of how he thought and acted under similar circumstances. But that will be too intense. We have to learn from that. And he narrated them repeatedly to all the women devotees as he did to the men. So, same thing in different forms, whether woman or man. And so he told both of them and kindle the love of God in their hearts. So only when the desires are diffused, then we can feel love of God, not otherwise. If we have strong desires of the world, we cannot feel love of God. It would just be something like the beauty of some ideals. The following incident will make this clear. So he tells about desires. He has taken the examples of women first. Whoever, men or women, went to the master, they felt in their heart of hearts attracted by his amiability, courtesy, and his extraordinary love, free from the slightest tinge of love. So this was the first thing which strikes people. Sweetness, because Ananda Swarup. Love without any personal motive, which is not possible in human beings. Amiability, courtesy, they're all perfect human nature because he is God. Love free from the slightest tinge of lust and became anxious to have the blessings of meeting him once more whenever there was an opportunity. So we see him, feel attracted, got to go back to the world, but that desire to come back again will never end till we reach perfection. Not only did they themselves visit him again and again, but they also took with them all their acquaintances so that they too might enjoy pure bliss in his company. Normal, good human behavior. One afternoon, one of our acquaintances went to the master at Dakshineshwar with her stepsister and a sister of the latter's husband. A woman, stepsister, and stepsister's sister-in-law. They saluted him and took their seats. The master then inquired about their welfare and started a conversation leading to the thought that the only aim of life should be to have a loving devotion to God. Now, realizing God, he does not immediately propose, as we have seen about the bhakti path. But love of God is the aim. And when they start loving, they will go to higher. So we see in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, sometimes he says that the only aim of life is realization of God. And sometimes he says the aim of life is to love God. Why? Because they cannot appreciate this realization of God, so love God. And when they start loving, as we have seen just now in the previous chapter, their ideal will go on growing. This is important. Can one, continued he, easily take refuge in the divine Lord? That is another thing. Surrender to God does not come. Our self-will and dependence on hundreds of persons and objects of this world. So, love of God one thing, surrender to God another thing, and he says it is not easy because we have hundreds of attachments which we feel as support. Inscrutable are the ways of Mahamaya. That is called Mahamaya. God's own power of something appearing as something, and that is the delusion. Thus she, this is personified into a woman. Does she allow this to happen? She makes one who has no relative in the world rear up a cat and live a worldly life. No one in the world. But she does not go to God. She rears up a cat and becomes attached to that and spends whole life like the family with the cat. One then goes round to procure milk for the cat and says, what can I do? The cat does not take anything but fish and milk. So the whole life becomes centered in the cat. Instruction to women devotees about it. So he's talking like that, huh? Perhaps one comes, he's giving examples. Perhaps one comes of a rich and noble family. One woman known to Saradananda Swamiji, so she has reported all that to him. Perhaps one comes of a rich and noble family. The husband and children have all died. Family was good. Those who are left behind are so many widows. Imagine as if there is to be no death for them. That is, the widows survive. As if there is no death, everybody has died. Some parts of the house are falling to pieces. Others have already given way. On the roof, trees have grown on the roof. And along with them, a few plants of spinach. The widows gather them, make a curry, and go on with their worldly life. But why? Why do they do not take refuge in the divine Lord? Theirs is indeed the time for that, but that is not to be. So unless there is evolution in the mind, time opportunities everywhere there. People will say who are so much busy. They have no business. So much time is there, but the mind does not go. Desires. Again, perhaps, one loses one's husband soon after one's marriage. That was common in those days. And becomes a child widow. She is now a childless, grown-up widow. Why does she not call on God? Grown-up means now she has come to understand things. So now she can call on God. But that she will not do. She becomes the guardian of her brother's household. With her hair fastened in a knot over the crown of her head and a bunch of keys tied at the end of her cloth, she wags her finger at everyone and exercises her authority over all. The whole village is afraid of her, the terror of all. And she goes about saying, my brother cannot have even a meal if I am not there. The wretch of a woman, why does she not look at what has happened to her? What after all has she gained for herself? Gone. Now this is up to Thakur said. Now Saradananda Swamiji is telling us something wonderful. Well, there was a peculiar coincidence here. The third lady of the party, who was meeting the master that day for the first time, was one of this type of a woman guardians of their brother's household. Nobody had told the master of it before, but in the course of conversation, the master referred to that example and began to explain the powerful influence of desires and the existence of endless strata of desires in human minds. Needless to say, these words entered into the very heart of that lady. Hearing of the examples, the sister of that lady of her acquaintance nudged her and whispered, Sister, just fancy, such words should come out of the master's lips today of all days. How will my sister-in-law take these words? To this, our acquaintance replied, what can we do about it? It is his pleasure. Nobody tutored him. That was his method, automatic. The struggle of incarnations with their subtlety. Say they explained now how the incarnations settle is there. It becomes very clear from a study of human nature that the higher a man, that is important thing, very important thing. It becomes very clear from a study of human nature that the higher a man's mind rises, ascends, the more intensely do these certain desires pain. So now you are questioning the taking consideration the pain. One who has committed thefts, uttered falsehoods, or indulged in licentiousness innumerable times is not much pained by repeating those actions. But an honest and high-minded man considers himself guilty and becomes distressed even at the thought of such things. Although incarnations of God are often seen to refrain from gross worldly enjoyments all their lives, they fight with the subtle desires of their mind to the same extent as we do and feel the pain of 100 times as we do, and they and feel is not we, huh? Desires of their minds to the same extent as we do, and feel the pain 100 times keener than we. When they see those desires take shape within their minds, a fact which they themselves clearly admit. How can we therefore regard their struggles to withdraw their senses from sight, taste, and other objects of the senses as faint? So they are actually feeling the pain very keenly and they are struggling. An objection regarding human feelings in incarnation and its refutation. People will say, God, how they can do. Perhaps even now some reader acquainted with the scriptures may say, but how can I accept what you say? Don't you see what Shankara, the paragon of monists, not the dualist who believes God is different. But how can I accept what you say? Don't you see what Shankara, the paragon of monists, says in the beginning of his commentary on the Gita regarding the birth and the assumption of a human body on the part of Sri Krishna? He says there, God, the eternally free, eternally awake and eternally pure in nature, the controller of all living beings, devoid of birth, etc., is born as it were, is possessed of a body as it were, through Maya, his own power, in order to do good to humanity. When Shankar himself says so, how does your statement hold good? That means, as it were, they hold. Without contradicting Shankara, we say that we still have reason to take our stand on. In order to understand him, Shankara, we must remember a thing. Just as he regards God's possession of name and form as apparent, so does he consider our possession of them equally false. Real nature of man is same. So we feel this and that. It is unreal. If incarnation, this is unreal, Shankar says, he also says that our self is unreal. Now compare. He regards the whole universe as a false superimposition on the reality of Brahman and does not admit its real existence. Therefore, the footnote is in English only, it is not necessary at all. So that Gita, Upadgat Bhashya is quoted, that is not done in English. Adhyas Nirupan, okay. That is, this thing is in the beginning of his Brahma Sutra Bhashya. Therefore, his conclusion will be understood if we take both these statements together. It is not his intention that we should regard the incarnation's embodiment and experience of pain and pleasure as a false appearance and regard such things on our part alone as real. If they are real, they can never go. If we accept our feelings and perceptions as real, we must accept those of an incarnation also as real. Therefore, what we have said before still stands. Difference he has already told, no selfishness in them. This is discussed from another standpoint. This will be clearly understood if we discuss it from another standpoint. The scriptures say that two distinct conceptions of the world arise in us when you look at it from the two planes of consciousness, the non-dual and the dual. If we ascend to the former plane and try to understand to what extent this unreal and real is explaining now. If we ascend to the former plane and try to understand to what extent the thing we call the universe is real, we get the immediate knowledge that it does not exist and has never existed. There is nothing but the reality of Brahman, one only without a second. While if we look at it from the dual plane, the world with the aggregate of various names and forms appears to be real and eternally existent, even as it is now with us, ordinary human beings. Although possessed of bodies, the incarnations and the persons liberated in life, devoid of body consciousness, dwell very often in the non-dual plane of consciousness. Therefore, they have the conviction, even when they live in the plane of duality, that the world is unreal like a dream. In between, mostly they stay in the divine plane. And sometimes in the human plane. And in the human plane that appears real. But because preponderance of unreal is there, so it is real like a dream. Though compared with the waking state, a dream is known as unreal. The dream of a dreamer at the time of dreaming cannot be called absolutely unreal. Similarly, compared with the state of their absorption in Brahman, the semblance of the world in the minds of the incarnations and persons liberated in life is unreal. But when they are not in samadhi, it cannot be regarded as absolutely unreal. Okay. We shall take up this further tomorrow. He has to discuss this attitude of a sadhaka in the life of an incarnation, in master's life. Om. We'll take up this again, continue. Om Sarva Dharma Sthapakasam Sarva Dharma Swarupaka Acharyana Mahacharyo Ramakrishna Te Namaha. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.
Jaya